Hi muckers, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you're all doing very well. I'm excited to sit down here and talk with you again. Let's have a little debrief. So, there is so much going on whenever it comes to Dan Schneider. Now, we are aware of Dan Schneider if you are a child of the Nickelodeon Disney Channel era. I mean, I guess most people are. Most people. Like, different eras. Like, my one was, like, Victorious and iCarly, and my brother's one was, like, The Amanda Show. So I think a majority of the population, specifically that'll watch these kind of commentary videos, have grown up with some sort of entertainment as children, and we long for entertainment as adults as well. But anyways, Dan Schneider is fighting back the Quiet on Set documentary, and he's saying that his reputation has been so tarnished just by this documentary that he now has no other choice but to sue. And I think that that is such BS, because you're aware and I am aware of all of this about Dan Schneider before the Quiet on Set documentary. And I haven't even seen the Quiet on Set documentary because it's not even available in the UK. However, I'm aware of my own opinions of Dan Schneider from just watching the shows that Dan Schneider inflicted on us as children. Now, I've gone back and watched some of those. You know when you just want comfort some night, you go and you want to watch SpongeBob or iCarly or something like that? I've started doing that, binging my favorite shows on Disney Plus. I've been watching the Nickelodeon ones on Nickelodeon, or wait, where is it now? It's Netflix, on Netflix. The Nickelodeon stuff on Netflix, and some of them have not aged very well at all, actually. And I remember specifically whenever I was younger watching these shows, and my brother would sit in, he never liked Victorious. Now, he's a little bit older than me. He never liked Victorious because he thought it was very creepy. And again, he would have been similar age to what the actors were, and he was even picking up on it, so he refused. My eldest brother refused to watch Victorious with me because he found it really creepy. I remember specifically he always used to say that what they did to Ariana Grande was really creepy, and then what they did to Victoria Justice was really creepy. And I mean, I've been going back and watching it, and just what those characters do randomly in an episode for no reason is very much so for the weird fetish of the creator or one of the producers or something, whether that was Dan Schneider or anybody, but they're all to blame for it. And we're dealing now with everyone pointing fingers and being like, well, that person was worse, that person was worse, that person was worse. And if you're aware as well, Dan Schneider recently came out and did his own little press tour with Tebow from iCarly. Tebow, I was rooting for you. We were all rooting for you. I'm so disappointed in Tebow. We had this orchestrated interview that Dan Schneider released on his own YouTube channel and then put out to the press, which is so funny because he had full creative control over it and also editing control over the questions, where he sits down and he goes, yeah, maybe there were some things that I did wrong. I look back on it and I think, we should have done things differently. However, it wasn't just me. Things had to get approved. There were other adults. Yeah, the other adults that were involved are people that have been actually convicted. Like, you know what I mean? This is not the one up that you think it is. So I think it's so ironic that Dan Schneider tried to speak to the public here. So many dislikes on this video. The comments got turned off. That didn't work. So what's Dan Schneider now going to do to his furthest tarnished career that he did to himself? He's now suing for defamation. Now, suing for defamation is so common. Like, whenever I see anyone in the industry that we talk about sue, my mind immediately, and yours probably does as well, defamation. I feel like it's the most common fucking thing ever, and a majority of them just don't go anywhere, and they're more so just threats. So it'll be very interesting to see how far this Dan Schneider one goes, specifically because he's saying that this is the reason that his reputation is tarnished, which I would argue is not the case at all. I mean, it's a reason, but the reason is you. So let's get to this article. The news was broke to Variety. I'm going to open a White Claw with the sole reason that I filmed this video 3 times and I was not recording. So I just need a little drink. If I have to talk about Dan Schneider again, I'm taking a little drink. Also, any Swifties out there, what do you think about the new album? Hated it at the start. It's also very long. There's no reason for that to be 31 songs. But I would love if Mariah released 31 songs. Anyway, I just get so much from Taylor already. I love the album. At parts, there's some songs I love, and then there's some songs that I haven't even listened to for the first time because there's too fucking many of them. What the fuck was that? Did my window just open on its own? Interesting. All right, let's get to this article. Dan Schneider sues the Quiet on Set producers for defamation and calls the Nickelodeon abuse docuseries a hit job. Not a foot job, Dan? You know he loves them. Sorry. If you know Dan Schneider, that's what he... Anyways, Dan Schneider has filed a defamation lawsuit against the producers on the investigation Discovery docuseries Quiet on Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV, which uncovered alleged abuse and misconduct at Nickelodeon and became Max's biggest streaming title ever, which I didn't even know that it was their biggest one, but I guess everyone was talking about it. The lawsuit, obtained by Variety and filed by Schneider's attorney, Jana and Richard, reads in part. So this is what it reads. Whoa, ignore the tan on my hand. That is crazy. It's crazy how just some parts get more spray tan than others. But what do we feel? It's a nice overall vibe, right? For the summer. Something fun for the summer. Cool for the summer. So this is what the lawsuit says. Quiet on Set's portrayal of Schneider is a hit job. It might have focused on him, but if he's done so many things and so many people are speaking out against him, then whose fault is that? Dan Schneider's. Not anyone else's. While it is indisputable that the two bona fide child sexual abusers, or that two of them, worked on Nickelodeon shows, it is likewise indisputable that Schneider had no knowledge of their abuse, was not complicit in it, condemned it once it was discovered, and critically was not a child sexual abuser himself, but for the sake of clickbait, ratings and views, or put differently, money, defendants have destroyed... Okay, this part's crazy. Defendants, so the producers, have destroyed Schneider's reputation and legacy through these false statements and implications that Schneider is exactly that. Now, one thing I will say, as a child of Nickelodeon and being aware of all of these different shows, if I had to think about Dan Schneider's legacy, before this docuseries, I haven't even seen it, what words come to my mind? Feet? Creep? Weirdo? Uncomfortable? Feet again? That's all he used to get the kids to do. Why the fuck does iCarly need like 10 scenes about feet from the kids in one episode? Dan Schneider, you're a creep. So I think it's crazy to say that people have destroyed Dan Schneider's reputation and legacy because they compiled everything. At the end of the day, this information about Dan Schneider, for the most part, has been out, actually most of it has been out there for a very long time. Like a very, very, very long time. So this is just... someone came and compiled it all together. And yeah, it focused on Dan Schneider, I can only assume, because we all know Dan Schneider. That's not our fault. It's not their fault. Whose fault is that? Dan Schneider. In this docuseries, we had producers, ex-writers, child stars, everyone speaking up against Dan Schneider. So, the producers just did the work of putting it all together. If all of these things about you put together don't make you look like a good person, maybe you're not a good person. Maybe we should start there, Dan Schneider. Put the socks on the feet again, so there's no distractions, and let's focus on that. Quiet on Set details Schneider's rise as a creator and producer on Nickelodeon shows including The Amanda Show, Drake and Josh, Zoe 101, iCarly, and Victorious. I went to watch Drake and Josh a couple days ago. It was one of my favorite shows. Can't watch it anymore knowing that Drake Bell comments on hate videos about me. Doesn't have the same oomph about it. The childhood nostalgia is not there anymore knowing that he hates me. He hates me. Former Nickelodeon writers, child stars, and crew members appear in 5 of the episodes of the docuseries, and I think there was only 5. And then maybe there's a bonus one. I think there was, but I don't know if that's all 5. And it accuses Dan Schneider of creating a hostile work environment and sexualizing former child actors on television. We've all seen the clips. Dan Schneider can say, he's going to go on and say that it's ran past so many people. Well, look at who else was hired. They're all creeps too. It was ran by adults. Yeah, the adults in question, creeps. All right, so Schneider, a representative for Schneider, said in a statement to Variety, everything that happened on the show that Dan ran was carefully scrutinized by dozens of involved adults, all creeps, and approved by the network. If anything, this just shows that the network was surrounded by creeps. If there was an actual problem with the scenes that some people now years later are sexualizing, they would be taken down, but they're not. They're constantly aired all over the world and enjoyed by both kids and parents. Now, one thing that's really crazy about this is that their response to child actors growing up and feeling traumatized by scenes of them is, well, people are still enjoying it around the world to this day, so go fuck yourself. Like, imagine that being the response. That's crazy. Now, also, I want to comment on this very quickly. this ideology of child shows having sexual innuendos. We've seen it before. Nickelodeon was a little bit different. Nickelodeon did the sexual innuendos with the children. Like the children acted out or were acted upon the sexual innuendos. Not to bring it to this place, but I'm very aware of that from Colleen Ballinger. Colleen Ballinger, during her Miranda Sings show, would always say at the start of the show to the parents here, like, you're not going to be bored because there's innuendos that'll go over the kids' heads. And in her show, the innuendos, for the most part, are, you know, the kids being the blunt of sexual jokes. This is what happens on Nickelodeon as well. Look how that happened for Colleen. Look how it's happening for Dan Schneider. There's already a moral issue with child shows having sexual innuendos, point blank, period. But whenever the sexual innuendo directly involves a minor, that is not okay. So if you can't get that, then you're stupid. It says, Schneider himself said in a video posted after the launch, which is the one we watched with Tebow, the really great one, watching over the past 2 nights was very difficult. Facing my past behaviors, some of which are embarrassing and that I regret. I definitely owe some people a pretty strong apology. So here's what we see. We see this often when people are in scandals. They'll address it publicly, loosely apologize, and then when the public don't accept it, they go full throttle, like, I just PR disaster. I need to, like, fucking get in control of this, and then they normally turn to suing, which is what we're seeing with Dan Schneider. He looks awful here. Which is what we're seeing with Dan Schneider. Schneider's lawsuit claims that the voiceovers and graphics in Quiet on Set, as well as the series trailer, are purposefully and intentionally defamatory in that they're falsely and repeatedly state or imply that Schneider is a child sexual abuser and committed crimes in that regard, and have been interpreted as such by countless average, ordinary, or reasonable viewers. That's what they're calling us, average and ordinary. Pff, Jesus, rough. No, I think we can come to our own conclusion about Dan Schneider, and again, as someone who hasn't seen the documentary, I came to my own conclusion about Dan Schneider from just watching his shows as a child. In a separate statement sent to Variety alongside the legal complaint, Schneider wrote, recently, the docuseries Quiet on Set highlighted mistakes I made, so you're agreeing. Quick. And per judgment I exhibited during my time at Nickelodeon, most of which happened decades ago. I love when people do this when they get called out, when they focus on how long ago these things were. We see this often with just anyone who ends up getting cancelled, where they will say, oh, but that's a different version of me. That was so long ago. So for Dan Schneider saying right here, basically, that this happened decades ago, right? Sorry, my mom is texting me like crazy. When Dan Schneider is saying, oh, this happened decades ago. Dan Schneider, I looked this up, is currently like 58 years old, which means that a decade ago, which is 10 years, right, was in his late 40s. So you're not a young person. You're a grown person who's lived a life. You've lived a life. At 48 years old, you're being like, oh, but I was so young. No, you're not. You know, you've lived enough to know that you shouldn't sexualize children. And for any of my 48-year-olds out there, I'm sure you'll say the same thing. You know what I mean? Like, fuck off. Like, this, oh, it was me whenever I was younger, does not work when you were still a grown fucking man and you're older than the kids were. Like, Dan Schneider back then was older than what the kids are that he did this to now. Like, them having grown up. So please, cut that bullshit. During my early years as a producer, well, most people in their early years of producing don't do that kind of stuff, so I don't really know where that's coming from. What a creep. Working on shows for the production. There is no doubt that I sometimes was a bad leader. What a way to put it. I am sincerely apologetic and regretful for that behavior, and I'll continue to take accountability for it. However, after seeing Quiet on Set and its trailer and the reactions to it, so the problem is the reactions. Well, people have a right to be, you know, incredibly reactive to someone who does these kind of things to kids, putting them in harmful situations for a joke, which you did at a bare minimum. But who am I to judge? I sadly have no choice but to take legal action against the people behind it. In their successful attempt to mislead viewers, I think we can come to our own conclusion. I think most people went into the show already with an idea of Dan Schneider. Just going to be honest. If you watched it, did you or did you not already have a preconceived notion of him? And that's your fault, Dan Schneider. All right. They went beyond reporting the truth and falsely implied that I was involved in, with, or facilitated horrific crimes for which child predators have actually been prosecuted and convicted. So what you're basically saying here is that you surrounded yourself by people who have like been prosecuted for this kind of stuff. Great, Dan. Great. Weird. It's a weird get out clause. Actually, the people I work with are all in jail now. Fine. Schneider continued, I have no obligation to anyone highlighting, or I have no objection to anyone highlighting my failures as a boss, but it is wrong to mislead millions. Again, putting information together is not necessarily misleading if it's already bad. That's your fault. Of people of having a false conclusion that I was anyway involved in the heinous acts like those convicted by child predators. I owe it to myself, my family, and the many wonderful people involved in making these shows to set the record straight. In addition to Dan Schneider, Quiet on Set also investigates other people working at Nickelodeon at the time, including dialogue and acting coach Brian Peck. Interviewed in Quiet on Set is Drake and Josh star Drake Bell, who alleges that he was a victim of Peck's sexual abuse. In 2003, Peck was 43 at the time and was arrested on 11 charges, including sodomy, lewd act upon a child 14 or 15 by a person 10 years older, and oral copulation by anesthesia or controlled substance, but the victim was not previously named. Quiet on Set also mentions Jason Michael Handy, a production assistant who was arrested and charged with a lewd act of a child under 14. The mother of a former child actor who appeared in the Amanda Show claimed that claimed in Quiet on Set that Handy sent her daughter a photograph of him naked, masturbating. Another Nickelodeon staffer, animator Easel Channel, was sentenced to more than 7 years in prison for committing lewd acts on a 14-year-old boy and showing him pornography. So, Dan Schneider, even the people you're surrounding yourself with in these productions for kids were not great. I wonder how far this lawsuit will go. Like, will this be one that gets thrown out? Or will this go far? Because if all this is in the public about Dan, what's in the private? Let me know. We'll talk about it down below. I appreciate you being here, and goodbye.